Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here and talk with all of you guys. Have been watching the Lunch and Learns for the past couple of years, and there's always some really interesting topics. So it's really exciting for me to be here today and talk with all of you. So I'm a therapist, just like you guys. If, probably most of you. I don't know. I guess I haven't checked. So I am, I guess, used to being interrupted and having a conversation. So I'm going to run through my presentation, but if you have questions, I'll try to pick them up as we go. If you if you need clarification on something, I will certainly try and pick that up at that time. I'll also answer questions at the end. So thank you all so much for being here and being interested in this topic. I am all things couples, and I am very passionate and excited about that. But I don't always run into people who are as excited about couples work as I am. So I'm very excited to talk to you guys about this, and I'm also happy to hear any thoughts or questions that you have as we go along. So I'm going to talk about the Gottman method, and it's hard to distill something that you do all the time, every day, into a 60-minute presentation. So I'm going to do my best to do that today. But there's a lot more to this. I'll just hit what I think is helpful to you guys. And I am not pure Gottman. I do a lot of Gottman and I'm Gottman certified, but you may hear some other things we woven in. And if you do, then that is really me. That's not the model. But I think it's pretty commonplace for us who are in the trenches doing therapy to pull on different modalities and theories and weave those together for our clients. So, so I'm Sherry Timko. I have been in the mental health field for about 35 years, and I've been in private practice for 20, over 20. And I started specializing in couples work almost from the beginning. So this is really what I know. This is my specialty. This is where I have invested most of my time and energy and training is into understanding the dynamics of couples. So I'm going to go through this. I am curious how many of you currently do couples therapy or if any of you plan to do it in the future. And if you are comfortable, just drop that in the chat. It'll help me get a sense of how many of you guys are already doing this work and how many of you are just here because you're interested. Okay, good. I've done a little, I do great. All right, thank you. Thank you all for chiming in. Okay, if we can advance the slide. All right, so these are my objectives. I have to do this for the CE credits. I hope that they're not complicated because I don't intend this to be a complicated lecture. I want to talk a little bit about how couples therapy is different than individual work. It is very different work, and you have to have a different mindset. When I go from a couple session into an individual session and vice versa, it's like I have to change the skill set that I'm using. So I want to talk about that just a little bit. I'm going to talk about the core principles of the Gottman method. I have a little bit of information about what to look for in your individual clients to determine if couples therapy might be helpful. I have a tool for you guys, and then I'm going to do Q&A. Now, as I go through this, I invite you to look at this information from two lenses. One is to think about how this affects your clients. That's the work that we do. That's what I hope you get from this in terms of professionally. The other lens is I hope that you look at how this model, how this lens applies to your own relationship, either your present one or a relationship you've had in the past. as therapists, we put ourselves on the line every day and we show up as the tool. But being so involved and entrenched in this work means that we leave our work and we go home and we try to interact with our partner and our families and our friends and all the other people we come in contact with. And it's hard to separate those parts. And it's hard not to let the work that we do flow into that. So I hope that you also gain something from the perspective of thinking about your own relationship and how this applies to you. I would like to say that I am a better partner because of my therapy work, and maybe I am, but probably my therapy is better because of my relationship, and I think about how things work, how to apply the ideas to my own relationship. So I hope that you do that also. One of I was doing couples work for a long time, probably over 5 years at least, and I was certified in a model that I truly believe in, but also realized that I wasn't doing that with my client. Like I wasn't doing that with my spouse. So it was when I came across the Gottman method and realized that the Gottmans could explain why I had a good marriage and I didn't do any of the things that I was teaching my clients to do. So that's why I hope that you apply this personally, not just professionally. All right, so the next slide. Who am I? Okay, so I started in this field working with teenagers, and I loved that work. Teenagers are so fascinating, challenging, engaging. I love that work. But it also was work that was mostly about teaching them to recognize where they had control and to wait. They had to wait until they were adults. So after a few years, I switched to doing family work. And I was like, this is fantastic. I have the parents in the room, the kids in the room. We can really change things. And we did. What happened though is that I started doing some couples work. And I realized that I could impact not only my identified teenage patient, but all of their other siblings and anyone else in that system. And I could do that with just the couple in the room. And that's when I really fell in love with couples work. Um, that's where I saw that I could have the greatest impact, and the trickle down effect was really, really powerful. Um, so I often say I do it for the kids, even though I never see any kids unless they wander across my telehealth screen, you know, while a parent's dealing with a quick thing in the middle of a session. But this work is intricately tied to all of the other work in these ways. All right, so what you see in front of you is this list of things that I've been doing professionally as I try to be prepared to do this intricate work. And the reason that I have all of these different things is because couples work is just a highly specialized area of therapy, very much like a highly trained trauma therapist or someone who specializes in OCD or in eating disorders. This field, the couples therapy field, requires a lot of skill in order to do it well. So if we can, next slide. All right, so I just wanted to throw some details out here about couples therapy. About half of households are married, another 20 million, so another about 15% are cohabitating. The average length of marriage is 8 years. Now, that is different depending on whether you're looking at first marriage, second marriage, third marriage. All of those have different lengths of time to it, but the average length of marriage is 8 years. About half of couples go to couples therapy in the course of their marriage, and most of them see improvements foregoing, and the majority of therapists are doing some couples work. So this affects many of you. Um, if you're at the beginning of your career, probably you'll dabble in some couples work at some point. If you've been a seasoned therapist, you probably have a season when you did some couples work. So this is really relevant for all of us. And then when you think about that from that other lens where we are the couple, then a lot of us are also going to therapy. Next slide. Couples therapy requires a different set of skills. In order to be really good at couples therapy, you must simultaneously be on each partner's side at the same time. That is true even when you would, outside of the room, say, well, this partner is more to blame here and that partner is more to blame there. If you were not simultaneously on both partners' side, then one of them is going to leave and feel like they were thrown under the bus and really beat up by the work. And that is not where people make change. People make change due to the empathic relationship. And then from there, teaching them skills and helping them get good at doing those things. So, excuse me. So to me, this is one of the key pieces that makes couples therapy different. When you're doing individual therapy, you can 100% be on your client's side, even if you were teaching them something new, even if you were gently pushing them out of their comfort zone, they can still feel like you are 100% on their side. And with couples work, if you do that, you are going to undermine the relationship, which is what your client is. Neither partner is your client, it is the relationship. So sorry. The therapist is a translator between two partners. So when you do couples work, you're not working with a partner who's broken and a partner who's not, or two broken partners. You're dealing with two people who are autonomous, fully functioning individuals, and you're not trying to change who they are. You're trying to help them bridge the differences between them so that they can communicate, so that they can work together. As a therapist, we are the diagnostician of the system, and our job is to help them have conversations with each other, not have conversations with us. It doesn't mean I don't have any conversations directly with the client. Very often we'll be strategizing or I'll be teaching a skill. However, the real change in couples work comes from them talking to each other and me being more as a coach to each side so that they can clean up their language, so that they can say what they really mean, so that they can come up with new ideas, so that they can connect with each other on that emotional level. All right, next slide. I gravitate to the Gottman method. One of the things about couples work is finding the method, the model that really speaks to you. And the Gottmans really appeal to my sense of logic. They have studied 3,000 couples intensively in the Love Lab. That's where they bring a couple in for a weekend. They stay in this apartment and they have cameras around and they stay for the weekend like they were going away. And they tell them to act naturally. And what they say is after about 10 minutes, they forget about the cameras and they forget that they're in the Love Lab and they just act normally. So while they're going about their getaway, they also leave things like a urine sample in the restroom so that they can test cortisol levels. So this is some of the most highly advanced couples research that exists. They also have studied 40,000 couples over the last 40 years. So their work is really grounded in evidence-based research. This really appeals to logical thinkers. And for me, like it's that idea of going from the behavior to the emotions. And a lot of other theories start from a different place, but Gottman therapy is very behavioral based. And so when I do work with couples, I'm focused a lot on changing the way they interact with each other because I know the attitudes and the feelings will follow. So the main goals of Gottman therapy are to teach relationship skills, to assist them in solving problems, to increase their intimacy, respect, and affection for one another, and then to make relationship repairs. All right, great. The Sound Relationship House. So the Gottmans have organized their research into this illustration, which then I think helps clients really understand where they're coming into therapy, where their relationship is. So most Gottman therapists will start with a good assessment of the relationship, and then they will use that assessment to um, guide the therapy that they do. So I thought that I would run through this because this is kind of the cornerstone of all of the other things that you would do in Gottman work. Um, their research has shown that there are certain characteristics that couples who have really good relationships all share. And it doesn't depend, it's completely independent of their relationship structure or the values that they share and have built their relationship on. It is built on these qualities and how they show up in their relationship. So I lay that out for them in the assessment. When I work with a couple, I do a really good assessment. Then we do a session where I go over all of that assessment information and I give that to them. I want them to understand what's working and what isn't working and why. So we go through this so that they also know where we're headed from the beginning. All right, so I'm just going to walk through this very similarly to the way I might with a couple. And each of these things is a different characteristic or quality that the Gottman research has found to be important. And like I said, this is very similar to the way that I would talk about this with a couple. So when I think about a relationship, it has three levels to it. The first level are the first two lines on the illustration, the love maps and fondness and admiration. So the research says that we store information about our partners in kind of a map in our brain. In it, we store their likes and dislikes, how they tend to react to things, their childhood stories, everything that we know about them, we store in these maps. When you first meet your partner, usually that's when couples talk. They talk, that's when you can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning, talking about everything under the sun. You never run out of things to say, and you're not even tired from it. Well, what's happening during that stage is you're building those maps from the ground up. Now, that intensive talking naturally dies down. You have other things come up, you make a decision about the relationship, you've heard all the stories, whatever the reason, that intensive talking dies down. Now, this is not a problem because you use those maps to understand what your partner is doing, what they're thinking without having to talk about everything. The trouble comes that when couples have been together for a while, those maps fall out of date. It is expected that each partner is going to grow and change. So as they do, those maps get out of date. So couples who have really good relationships have some of that intensive talking built into the relationship. So that is one of the areas that Gottman has us work on with couples is to build those love maps so that they can feel close and connected. The second part of that first level is fondness and admiration. So this is how often you say to your partner, "Thank you for that thing that you did that made my life better." Or, "I'm really glad that we're still together." It's how often you pass each other in the hallway and you might touch just casually on the shoulder, touch a arm, maybe even share a quick kiss. It's when your partner walks in the room, do you make eye contact and actually look happy to see them? Now, these are just tiny little moments in life, but they're little touchstones. So every time you have one of these little touchstones, it's a moment of connection. And so the more a couple has those moments of connection, the more they feel close and safe in the relationship, regardless of what else is going on. So those are the first two in that foundational level. And that's how you can then use those to as interventions for the couple. So the second level is most of the stuff that's in between, not the first two lines, not the top two lines. And this is really how well a couple gets along on a day-to-day basis. When this part of the relationship is working well, either couple can bring up a problem and they talk it through until they get to a solution that they can both live with. When they don't get to a solution that instead spins out into a conflict, there is a way to bring an end to that conflict in a way that builds the relationship. And between that conflict and the next conflict, there's time to connect and repair and relax with each other and have fun. And so when that whole system works well, you can move from conflict into relax and repair and then move into a conflict again. And it's continuing to build the relationship the whole time. So when I interact with clients, I'm assessing each of those pieces of how they bring up conflict, how they talk it through, what triggers them, where's the emotional flooding, what they do with that emotional flooding, and then how to get them to the conversation that is actually productive. And then once they're able to end the conflict, how do they connect in between? Now, some of those connections of in between come from that first level, but so in terms of Gottman, you would have interventions at every one of those points so that couples can clean up their interactions, do it right, and then start to develop some new habits and new ways of interacting in all of that. I am used to stopping and taking questions at this point. I think I'm going to do that. Please feel to drop them in the chat. I'm going to go through the other level and the two pillars, but I just want to stop just a moment and make sure I catch any questions. Okay, I know there's usually a delay on the questions. I will pick any up if anyone wants to drop them in the chat. Okay, I think part of this is I go through this with clients, and those natural breaking points are points when I get to drink. And so going straight through it, I'm like, where's my break? All right. I sometimes say the therapist is like a referee. Is that a bad metaphor to use? Um, you can use the metaphors that make sense for you and work for you and make sense to your clients. So if a referee, if that idea makes sense to them, that makes that's perfectly fine. I don't tend to think of myself as a referee. I tend to think of myself more as a translator. So if they are talking and they are not connecting, what I often will do is translate what one said and help the other one hear it, and then translate what the other one said and then help the other one hear it. So I'm doing a couple of things at that point. I'm helping each partner clarify what they really mean. I'm also helping them say it in much better language and trying to use language that their partner can hear. I almost think that in every couple, they've got two different languages. Even though they are technically speaking the same language, they are they're not. They don't have the same meaning. And sometimes it comes down to the point where it's like it's the difference of a definition of a word. And if I can pull that out and help them see that they're really arguing the difference of a word, then I can help them come to a common definition of that word so that they can talk to each other. Translator. Okay. The way that I do an assessment is that I meet with them together for the first session. I want to see how they interact with each other, and I want to hear how they tell the story of what the problem is. So that first session is really so that I can hear their story and hear what they've already tried and what's working and what isn't. I then have them do some written assessments. I have two that I always use and a third that I sometimes use. One is about them and their personal history. One is about them and how they interact as a couple. And then the third is I've added a sexual history questionnaire. I have become certified as a sex therapist over the past couple of years. And so that third one, I have a lot of couples who are coming to see me specifically for sexual dysfunction or mismatches in the relationship. So I have them do those questionnaires. I then meet with them individually. That's where I hear their unique perspective on the situation. I'll often ask questions specific to how they're interpreting different aspects of the problem. And then in the third session, that's when I do this wrap up, which is what I'm going through today. So I do a pretty comprehensive assessment, and I want to pick up on the individual things, how they might be interacting, and then what the actual problem is that they've come to face. And then when I go through all of this, it's presenting it in a way that's about their strengths and their weaknesses. I usually call them strengths and challenges, so that they can start to see that this is kind of a picture of a system, and they've got pieces that are working well, and they've got pieces that are not working well. And so our job is to figure out how to help them live well together. And so that's kind of the front end of this work. And then we go into actually doing the interventions of changing things. So good questions. Please feel free to continue dropping them if that as I go through. Okay, so we talked about the first level, the second level. The third level I think of as where you're going and how you're going to get there. So these are the traditions that they put in place as a couple. These are the values that they live according to, and then the goals. So they both have individual goals and how they support each other in those individual goals, and then they have goals that they set as a couple and how well they work together on those. That top section, sometimes that top section is really the anchor for the couple. I met with a couple yesterday and they had been through so much stuff. And it was really those values and that outlook on the world that kept them anchored together, even though there were parts of their relationship that just were very challenging for each of them. For other couples, that top section gets contaminated by the conflict. If there's been infidelity, often there's a question of, do we really have the same values? Are we really looking at the world the same way, even though they may be in complete alignment? And then when couples are in conflict a lot, they are arguing over the nitty gritty or some big issues, and they rarely slow down to realize that they agree on many things in life. They're just hyper focused on that conflict. So I keep those things in mind. And when I have a couple, sometimes I'll have a couple and their full assessment comes up red. Red means like you're in trouble. And it's one of the things that I talk about in terms of strengths is how the conflict can contaminate the alignment between their values and their traditions and their goals. And that often helps them see that they're still anchored together, even if they don't look good on paper. All right, so the two pillars to this house are trust and commitment. Commitment is commitment to the relationship. I don't know how Gottman this is, but I know this is how I frame this. I'll share this with you. For me, there are a lot of couples who look on paper like they are not a good fit and look like they really, I don't know, they just look like they're not a good fit together. But they have been together for a long time. So sometimes commitment looks like we're committed to this and we love each other and we're going to work at this. Sometimes commitment looks like they get up every single day and they say, do I want to be with this person? Yep, today I still do. And then they go through the day and they're terrible to each other, or they are, just completely cut off from each other. And the next day they get up and they say, you know what? Am I still in this? Yep, I guess I am. And to me, that is also a very powerful version of commitment that isn't what you would think of in a storybook romance, but is certainly worth respecting and honoring that these two people continue to choose each other. So, commitment is very important in the structure of the whole system, but it's also important to have kind of a flexible view on what commitment can look like in couples who aren't strong in many of these areas but want to be. And so it's that want to be that you want to catch so that you can help them achieve that. All right, now trust is a little bit tricky. A lot of couples come to therapy because they do not trust their partners. That might be due to infidelity. That could be due to feeling let down by them. That could be harsh arguments that have just exploded and they have a lot of wounds from those arguments. And so when you ask someone if they trust their partner, you're asking them for a yes or no question to something that is not a yes or no situation. So this is what I usually explain to them. I think about trust differently than most other people do. Most people think about trust as, can I trust you with other people? And I do think that that is an important part of trust, but it is only one element of trust. Trust is also, can I trust you with our home? Can I trust you with our kids? Can I trust you with our money? Can I trust you to hear my opinion and take it seriously? Can I trust you to be sensitive with my weaknesses, with my soft spots, with my vulnerabilities? Can I trust you to really be there for me? Now, if I tried, I could come up with about 30 elements of trust. And in each of those, there's a level. Rarely are couples at 0% or 100% trust. In each of those dimensions of trust, they're at some point in between. So when we think about trust, we think about it growing incrementally. Now, I also use the idea of trust as a bucket, that it is a bucket that you fill with trust, and that trust can be knocked over that bucket can be knocked over in a second and it's all drained out. But you build trust drip by drip by drip every day, putting more into the bucket. So when I talk with them about this different levels, I'm framing this in terms of like we're continuing to put more into your trust bucket. And we really try hard not to dump that trust bucket over. So that framing of trust helps clients understand why their partner could hurt them or betray them in some of the deepest, harshest ways, and they still stay together. Because trust is so complicated and it's across a lot of dimensions. So you're just because someone comes in with a betrayal, with an infidelity, with an argument that got too explosive and really mean things were said, or even became physical because someone just became so overwhelmed with those emotions, they may still stay together because the trust is still high enough in other areas of the relationship that then um, make them have hope that they can repair that area. All right, so this is the guide. That's how I go over it with clients. I did give you guys some caveats in there uh, because from the clinician standpoint, we're evaluating these things. Now, as I work with couples, I also am going back to this, this image, this structure, so that I'm assessing where they are on these different qualities at any given time. Now, every one of these has at least 3 to 5 interventions that can be put in place. But really, the structure is so that you as a clinician can come in and bring your creativity and your what do you call that when you're in the moment and you come up with an intervention that specifically is for that client because it's exactly what they need to do. That um, the structure allows you to bring all of that in and create the intervention at the right moment for the couple where they are at that time. All right, so I'm going to pause again and give you guys a moment. This is a lot of information. This is a lot of information for clients. This is a lot of information for the therapist to be tracking. This is a little bit different than the other models. And this is why finding the model that really resonates with you makes sense. Okay, so let me give you guys a moment for questions. Yeah, that's a really good definition for trust. Trust is confidence that you will make decisions with mine and our best interests in mind. So I'm gonna trust that you can think about your needs, my needs, and our needs together at the same time. Good. The Sound Relationship House is available, really easy to find. You can Google it and find a copy of it and use it with clients in whatever way is helpful. It comes from, I, I don't know if this is the first place that it appears, but it comes from the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, which I think is a really good overview book of all of this content. It is written for clients, and there are a lot of quizzes and activities in it that help them walk through this path. But the concepts are covered pretty comprehensively in that book. Okay, so next slide. I wanted to leave you guys with a tool. Um, And I was trying to figure out how to make this interactive and couldn't with this setting. So I'm going to walk you through it. I love conversation questions. I think that they can be used to teach clients a lot of skills, and they can then be adapted to the point in the house that you're trying to teach them something new. So I have a lot of cards like right next to my desk. I have both Gottman cards and oh, I probably have 10 different sets of cards that sit next to my desk because then I can pull them into the work. So this is something that I use pretty comprehensively with couples. Um, the Gottmans have about 10 or 12 decks of cards that they use, and they have put all of their card decks online in an app for free. It's called the Gottman Card Decks app. And so that is always something that you can use with couples, or you can send them home with homework assignments. So the idea behind conversation questions is that you partner A asks a question, or partner B, and then partner A follows up with some good questions to help partner B talk about it more deeply. So when we looked at the sound relationship house, that first level is knowing each other in those love maps. So the conversation questions directly relate to building those love maps. But this also can be used in terms of like helping them talk through their values or helping them think more deeply about a problem or a topic that they're dealing with. It's also really great because it slows down the conversation with them and it puts each of them in a role before they're able to respond. In natural conversation, couples are used to partner A says their opinion, partner B responds, says their opinion, partner A, their opinion, and they just go back and forth. And what they're really doing is saying, this is what I think, I get what you think. All right, here's what I think. And they try to solve problems that way. And it can be effective, especially if they have a lot of goodwill towards each other. But getting them to actually slow down and understand their partner's perspective before they give that opinion helps them like process it and stop just thinking about what is the next thing I'm going to say, but instead tap into that curiosity of where their partner is. So I use this in lots of different interventions, this basic structure. So when you're on a very like superficial level, where you're just trying to get them to know each other better, you can start with questions like, what would you do if you won $1 million? Or if you could be an animal for 24 hours, what animal would you be? And then the second partner answers those questions, and then the first partner has to come up with a couple of questions related to what they said so that they can learn more about it. So if the question is, what would you do if you won $1 million? And the answer was, well, I would travel the world and give our kids some money. Then the partner who asked the question about the $1 million has to ask some questions and give them more information about that topic. So they might ask, where would you travel? How long would you be gone? How would you give the money to the kids? Would there be any rules attached to it? And it teaches the couple how to slow down that conversation so that the partner who's listening has to pull details so that they can be curious and ask more questions about it. Okay. They then switch, and the other partner gets a chance to ask the question and then ask the follow-up questions. It's important that couples learn to ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are ones that get them to ask, to think more deeply, and that the other partner cannot answer with a yes or no. And then, there we go. And then you can take that same structure and apply it to much deeper questions. So, like, where would you like to see us in 5 years? Or when we are intimate with each other, what are your favorite things? Or what are the things that make you feel connected to me? So you can use that same structure and deepen the questions into the topics. All right, so the question came up, how do you set, or do I set ground rules for couples as they communicate to help avoid arguments? This is one of the ways that couples work is very, very different than individual work. I am interrupting my clients all the time. And I have been doing this for a long time. So if I see that they are going to go in a direction that I know is not very helpful for them, I am going to interrupt, and I'm going to help them say that in a much more supportive, kind way than they were going. So I don't have a lot of arguing in session, even though I have couples talking to each other throughout most of it. And I rarely sit down and set up ground rules for the couple. Instead, I will interrupt and I'll teach a skill like asking good questions, or I will have kind of a sidebar with one of the partners to really understand what it is they're trying to say. Or I will ask them, can you say that in a way that asks for what you want rather than what you're not getting? So I don't do a lot of ground rules where they start in the first session and I'm like, okay, here's how we're going to run these sessions. In fact, I think of them as my space. This is one of the incredible things that I found with when we went to telehealth is that, you know, in my office, I can be like, these are my walls. This is how we're going to treat each other. But when I went to telehealth, I was then saying, this is our space. Yeah, that includes your couch. Still my rules, still my space. This is still how we're going to interact. All right. And if you have questions about this, don't hesitate to send me questions even after this. This is one of the things that is really helpful for me in helping them communicate well. All right. One more question, and I just want to switch. The next slide is referrals to couples therapy and what are indicators that they would probably do better in couples therapy than in individual. Mary, can they get a copy of my slides? Will that go out with the email?
Yeah, we can email a copy of the PowerPoint.
That would be great because we're not really going to have time to talk about this. The next one is how to make a referral for individual or couples relationship therapy or for sex therapy. And then the last one, well, there's a couple more. The next one is I gave you guys some tools and training that can be helpful. And then the last one is my contact information so that if you guys have questions, you can reach out to me. I also have online Facebook groups, and then I have a ton of blogs with all kinds of topics on each of my websites. So there's like a lot of information out there.